was a time of knights, castles, and chivalry. A time when war for the nobility was fun, when princesses were bought and sold for a dowry of land, and when 98% of the population farmed as peasants. Yes, it's everybody's favorite time, the Middle Ages. A time of religion, farming, and really, really early death. But sometime, in the 14th and 15th centuries, the Middle Ages died. So the topic of this flipped lecture is, who killed the Middle Ages? Our suspects are the steel-tip plow, the Crusades, the Welsh longbow, and the Magna Carta. We'll first turn our attention to the steel-tip plow. Now, surely, the plow, as one of the earliest inventions known to man, could not be guilty of killing anyone. But this plow of the Middle Ages is an entirely different animal. Medieval blacksmiths finally found another use for steel other than weaponry. With a steel-tip plow, medieval peasant farmers could cultivate more land than ever. Previously, their wooden-tipped plows splintered in rocky soil, but now, with their new and improved steel-tip plow, they could cut through rocky soil like butter. With more land cultivated, more food could be grown than ever before. The result in Europe was less starvation, and, for the first time since the fall of Rome, an increasing European population. With more food than needed, and not everyone needing to farm, peasants could do other things aside from agriculture. They could specialize and become bakers, blacksmiths, weavers, candle makers, glass workers, and best of all, merchants. Peasants could make their own money, their own cash, their own moolah, because not everyone was tied down to the land in a desperate attempt to grow enough food before the starving winter to come. Some peasants even escaped to the growing towns. After all, they don't need to farm anymore. If they could escape to a town and remain there for a year and one day, they could be free. And if they could get in on the new silk and spice trade, they could be rich. Filthy rich. Richer perhaps than even some of the lords. Perhaps. Now sure, these new towns quickly became overcrowded and sanitation was unknown, so sewage piled up in the streets, and diseases like dysentery, cholera, and plague likely would shorten your life. But who cares? You're rich. Really, really rich. And probably dead. But these new towns and the subsequent new wealth created a new class of people, a middle class. This completely wrecked the stratified medieval order, because we have something new, a middle class. We technically no longer truly have a Middle Ages, and that means the Middle Ages are dead. All of this because of the steel-tip plow. It killed the Middle Ages. Mystery solved, Watson. But wait, you say. What about the other suspects? For instance, how could we possibly ignore some of the bloodiest wars in human history? Wars of religious frenzy that went on for centuries. Certainly, they could be blamed for more than just a few deaths. Perhaps even the death of the Middle Ages. Beginning with Pope Urban's speech at Clermont, France in 1095, wave after wave of armored Christian knights swept into the Holy Land in a mostly futile quest to conquer Jerusalem, the holiest city in Christendom. But while the Crusaders were dealing out death and violence, they returned to Europe with the best of a more advanced Arab civilization. Through northern Italian ports of Venice, Genoa, and Rome, returning Crusaders brought Arab knowledge of algebra, astronomy, medicine, and alchemy. They brought new ideas and new thinking. These new ideas would help spark humanism, the idea that we should not just accept the world as it is, we should dig into it, experiment, and question. The ideas of humanism are most keenly exemplified by men such as Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo, Copernicus, Michelangelo, Machiavelli, and so many others who could specialize, thanks to the steel-tip plow, in the arts and sciences. But it was the Crusades that sparked this entire new way of looking at the world. Not only a new way of looking at the world, but new products and goods as well. Once more in European markets, goods from China, such as spices, appeared. In addition to spices, silk. These goods helped to restart European trade, and restart the towns. And with this new trade comes a rising middle class, and so on and so forth. So, thanks to the Crusades, Europeans now approached or looked at the world entirely differently than they did before. A world that they could ponder, figure out, and discover for themselves, thanks to humanism. and their food tasted a heck of a lot better too. Since they're no longer thinking medievally, then for sure, it has to be the Crusades that killed the Middle Ages. Finally, again, the mystery is solved. The Crusades killed the Middle Ages. Oh. But there's another suspect, I suppose. And this one is an actual weapon. It's the Welsh longbow. This bow first made its appearance during the 100 Years' War between England and France. In this war, the English army invaded France with a mostly peasant army, while the French fought with their nobility. They fought medievally. They fought with knights. Now, for many centuries, the armored knight was the elite military unit in Europe. Trained nearly like Spartans, these sons of lords began training at age 7. Armored from head to toe with a lifetime of military training, these knights were deadly, and in medieval Europe, they were unstoppable. They were literally the tanks of their day. So in the 100 Years' War, what do the English send to face the mighty French knights? They send peasants. Oh, but wait, there's one detail I omitted. These peasants are carrying a new weapon, the Welsh longbow, a 6-foot bow with as up to 120-pound draw weight. This bow, might I also add, shreds armor. It makes armor useless. With their peasant bowmen, the English win battle after battle over the formerly invincible knight. Not only does the longbow completely change the warfare, but it is also during this war that gunpowder, another invention brought over from trade through the Crusades, starts to appear. During the 100 Years' War, the first guns make their appearance. Now, while they're horribly inaccurate, they also make armor useless. So armor is pointless. And, by the way, cannons are also here. You know those incredible medieval fortresses called castles? Well, welcome to the gunpowder age. There goes the neighborhood. But it was the Welsh longbow that started it all. It made the medieval knight pointless. Armor will still be worn for protection and for fashion, but the medieval knight is no longer supreme. Now, you would rather have a 100 peasant bowman than 100 noble knights. Now, if you don't have knights, how can you possibly have the Middle Ages? And if you don't have the Middle Ages, the whole world is turning upside down. So once more, we have solved the mystery. The Welsh longbow has killed the Middle Ages. Huh. Well, oh, that's right. Once more, I've forgotten about our final suspect, the Magna Carta, or the Great Charter. But it's just a piece of paper. How much damage could it possibly do? What did it do? Kill the Middle Ages with a paper cut? Well, perhaps 1,000 paper cuts. The Magna Carta was a document signed by bad King John of England, the same John that was the brother to Richard the Lionheart. Richard died warring against France, and that made his brother John king. And John was a pretty lousy king. Now, in fairness, Richard had bankrupted the country, so John inherited a penniless kingdom. John raised taxes on his lords through the roof. When his lords wouldn't pay, he resorted to bribery, kidnapping, extortion, and in some cases simply seized lords' lands and threw them in jail. John also was losing a war in France. Disgusted with him, the English lords rebelled and forced John to sign a document in which he agreed to 63 of their demands. One of the demands and one of the ideas in the document is that no one, not even a king, not even King John, is above the law. Also, John could not simply raise taxes because he needed to or wanted to. He couldn't do it without the Lord's permission. Sounds like no taxation without representation. Finally, John, you cannot simply arrest lords and throw them in jail because you want to. Lords and everyone, by chance, needed to have a trial, a fair trial, a trial by one's peers, a trial by equals, a trial by jury. Now, John completely ignored this document right after he signed it. It's one of the reasons why he's so hated. But these ideas within the Magna Carta were essential to forming our country, because when George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin and their band of merry men were forming our country, they looked to the example of ancient Greece, to Athens and Sparta, but they also looked to the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta sowed the seeds for a republic. It sowed the seeds for what became us. And by us, I mean the United States of America. For the Middle Ages, then, though, no one is above the law. And if no one is above the law, then isn't everybody equal? This is yet another crazy idea from the Middle Ages. Remember our pyramid of power? Well, if everybody's equal, there is no pyramid. So, once more, who killed the Middle Ages? Honestly, I think I'm more confused than ever. I think we should just lock them all up and throw away the key. Lock them all up and bring my Middle Ages back. Bring them back. Bring back the time when life expectancy for men was mid-30s. Wait, I'm 40-some. On second thought, leave the Middle Ages where they belong. Leave them. Dead.